So-called stimulus budget simply because of on so many fundamental measurements, so many fundamental points, the government has missed the opportunity. And I think that the moments of budgets, particularly those that are presented in times of crisis, there are a few fundamentals that we must address in order to judge and merit this economic agenda of this government. One is around balance. One is around understanding the needs of the country, the needs of the economy in a given moment in time. And this government, obviously, that we saw in the so-called fall economic update, continues to miss the moment, continues to miss the mark on what economists and what Canadians have been asking for consistently. Another question is around fairness. What ability does this government have to address issues of equity, issues of justice in the policies it ascribes to this country at this most critical time? And finally, it really boils down to a matter of choices, no different than when a family puts together their budget. When an individual decides what to spend on and what not to spend on, that choices are made. Choices that sometimes only have short-term, immediate consequences, but oftentimes have very long-term consequences. And we've seen over a succession of budgets, over various governments, that the choices made have contributed to the overextension of the economy, to the underperformance and inefficiencies that our economy continues to see. Over-polluting, not respecting pay equity rules, and for some strange irony, this government decides to bury within a budget document the disassembling of pay equity legislation in this country, where women in this country are receiving 70 cents on the dollar of what a man makes for equal work. That they just decide in this moment of economic crisis to slide in some ideological opportunism. It also seems to speak to the idea and what the concepts are of the role of government. And here is where while there are moments of convergence in this House, moments when the parties can come to agree, I'm thinking of the apology to First Nations over the residential school travesties, while there are those moments of convergence when the place actually operates well, this is a moment of divergence in the role of government at this possible time. We recently heard from the President of the United States, speaking last night to the American people, about the role of government and the capacity of government in times like this to aid and assist in the Keynesian economic model, for those who follow those different theories and treaties that the Prime Minister should understand, as he is a trained economist like the leader of New Democrats, that there are moments and times for governments to step in. And while this goes against some of the fundamental prior reformist and current conservative ideologies of the role of government, and one can detect that. This government does not own this budget, does not love this budget, does not understand that it can simply cause so much discussion and concern in the markets, where on one day it presents a budget of some fictional surplus of some hundreds of millions of dollars, to then describe that the economy is recession-proof, as the Conservatives have described. The Prime Minister said that if Canada was going to have a recession, we would already have had one October 2008. To then have a finance minister then swing radically over to another side to describe potential aspects of this within weeks as potentially one of the greatest economic recessions, leading potentially to a depression. This does not build confidence in the Canadian system, does not build confidence in the Conservative government. We've seen in British Columbia, and in some senses Skeena, the place I represent, has been on the unfortunate leading edge of this recession for a number of years. I have communities like Hazelton, British Columbia, Fort St. James, Burns Lakes and beyond, who have suffered under 50, 60, 70% unemployment rates as the forestry sector has been virtually wiped out. Mill after mill closing. And we've gone to government and said we need some structural change. We need even a plan from the federal government for our manufacturing sector. Is there one available? 4 years. This is not a recent phenomenon. 4 years we've seen this storm coming. A botched softwood lumber deal, an increase in the Canadian dollar, and an eventual slowdown and popping of the American housing market would all lead most economists and forestry experts, which it did, to say the forestry sector is in trouble and will need a plan, will need some sort of strategy, coherent strategy from government. Instead, we see a hodgepodge in a budget that lumps together, and we're looking through this budget trying to find out where the pine beetle money that's been promised to British Columbia, at best estimates from government, 30 cents on the dollar of what has already been promised and committed in previous budgets has not gone out the door. They call it a crisis, Madam Speaker. They They acknowledge it as a crisis and send out the press releases and make the announcements, but don't spend the money. And this is a fundamental question of trust. Asking Canadians, families who are suffering through days of uncertainty, through job losses, and having to outmigrate out of their communities, to turn to a government who then says, we promise you more, but a promise must be based on some mutual trust. And when we've looked at the infrastructure announcement from this government in British Columbia, we've seen time and time again where the promises, when the dust settles and it's a year later and we look to the budget numbers to see what actually was spent on the ground in the creation of real jobs, we see figures like 15 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar. This does not build up the confidence of Canadians in this government's ability to perform. Employment insurance, much has been made of this, and this is an important factor, that the government's small measures on employment insurance only affects those who actually qualify, ignoring the fact that the problem lies in those who can't qualify. That we see a majority of women in the workforce, for example, who are unable, even though they're paying in to this insurance program, we'll soon have to call it a scheme, because a program that you pay into that you can't collect on sounds like a scheme to me. And for over the years, government has used the Employment Insurance Fund as a slush fund, simply to transfer money from workers and employers, collect it for the purposes of employment insurance, and used it for other purposes. That is unconscionable. And now we see, in times of need, the government further say, well, what we'll do is we'll extend out the other end. After you've been collecting for a number of weeks, we'll toss a few more weeks your way. Putting on blinders, ignoring purposefully, very cynically, the fact that most people don't even qualify. We've lost 35,000 jobs in British Columbia in January alone. 35,000 jobs. We all know as members of Parliament how difficult it is to work with a new employer, to bring a town council on side and bring new jobs into our constituencies. It takes a lot of effort, especially if we're hoping for good-paying jobs, manufacturing jobs. This is no easy feat to even bring 1,000 in. And our province lost 35,000. Gone like that. And we're looking to the place of where those will come back. We're looking for a government, we're looking for industries that will start to promote the types of economies that Canadians can believe in. And this government refuses to respond to what's in front of it. In the North, here's a fantastic example of a community that's struggled to survive and found innovative ways as their forestry sector has gone down. The Telkwa, community of Telkwa, 3,500 people got together, and they're farmers in their community, and they said, well, let's build a cooperative abattoir that we can get some people to work and support the farm industries, because we don't want to ship to southern British Columbia. It's not good for the animals, not good for the planet. It's not good for anybody, certainly not for farmers. So let's build this abattoir together. This government and the one before it put roadblock after roadblock in the way. And when we've gone for some small assistance for this that would help sustain jobs that exist and create more in a sustainable, conscious way, the government's been nowhere to be found. The Tsimshian Connector outside of Prince Rupert would help connect a First Nation village of nearly 1,000 people to the Port of Prince Rupert and the community, thereby cutting all sorts of expenses to government itself. We need this government to step up and start to pay some attention. Now, yesterday we had the opportunity of having the new Minister of Natural Resources in front of committee, and I had a very simple question for her after I congratulated her on her appointment. I said I'd like the Minister to please define what green energy, clean energy is under this government. Her response, Madam Speaker, was to turn to one of her officials with a quizzical look on her face. No working definition, and yet when you pick up the budget, page after page refers to green energy, clean energy. Now what exactly do they mean by that? They are looking backwards at technologies that Canadians have subsidized, like the nuclear industry, to the tune of billions upon billions of dollars, with inherent risks and all sorts of ethical challenges. Carbon capture and sequestration takes up the vast majority, the lion's share of what this government's talking about is renewable. The last time I heard coal was a renewable energy was out of a Conservative minister's mouth. Nobody else in the world believes this. It seems like fiction placed upon fiction. And when we look for trust, when we look for confidence, when we look for the balance of choices that every government must make, we find this government lacking. They are unsupportable. And I think at the end, while the Liberals are choosing to support this budget for political expediency, I think at the end, philosophically, this actually fits. That this marriage, this convenience, alliance, and new coalition actually fits. That they believe in these measures. And the unfortunate thing is Canadians will suffer for it, and our economy will become no more efficient, no more green, and no more looking to the future than it was before. Thank you very much.